since March, as it was mentioned before. And we know that over 260,000 individuals who were simply returned, expelled, as they call it, back to Mexico. And many of them are Central Americans who are trying, seeking, also as Eddie Canales mentioned and described today, trying to enter to, to the US. So I think what we have is pressing needs to find avenues and possibilities for individuals to migrate when it's impossible for them to live in the countries as a result of climate change. It is a desperate need, and we have to find more legislative options for them. I will leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helena. Yet another real-time, real-world example that you've shared of the impacts of the two hurricanes that hit just in the last couple of months, and how the impacts are intersecting also with the other ways that structural injustice exists, and how people who are already facing injustice in vulnerable situations are most impacted by climate emergencies. Thank you so much. We'll next invite Lucia from CARIF to share experiences from South America.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you all for being there listening. It's an honor for me to share this panel with Helena and Salotti, and I have the challenge to share the experience from South America that is sometimes really different from all the other experiences that we are used to here. We have a lot of similarities, as Elena said, but we also have some particular things that are worth sharing. South America is or has been known for a few decades for its good practices in the migration matters. And while there is some tradition in our countries about the mobility from one country to another inside the region, especially in South America, whole America, but especially in South America, and that idea that in South America things are easier or we have good practices sometimes is a double-edged sword, because it makes us difficult to put in the spotlight some issues regarding our issues in the international forums, because we do have, unfortunately, migration issues to attend and several challenges ahead of us, and we will try to put them today on the table. The thing is, if we must identify why do people migrate in a region, of course, the first answer, which we all know, is many reasons, and we can put them into two big categories or two big boxes that we all know, that there are seeking for asylum, and the big one, the economic reasons. And I use this because it's a very big category. We can easily think about what seeking for asylum means, but when we go to the economic reasons, it gets a little messy there, because states usually understand that having economic reasons to migrate means to have a fully voluntary choice made by someone that isn't crossed by despair and need. However, we all know that that's not true. People sometimes migrate because they have no other choice to have a decent life. And in this group, in the group of the economic migrants, we have people who have been displaced internally or even crossing borders, which we work with, driven by economic factors, but those factors are linked to production, to the exploitation of the environment, agriculture, food insecurity, as Elena was saying, the looting of natural resources. These people are included in the large group of economic migrants. And my point is, one of our main challenges regarding to this issue, to this topic, is to try to understand the economic factors and the importance of the production methods and the agriculture, and how we treat land and how what consequences it has on our countries or on our environments as climate change. If you ask anyone if there are in South America people who have migrate because of climate change, mostly the answer will be no. We have no climate change mobility. And that's because we tend to understand climate change only as natural disasters. So thankfully we don't have much of those in our region. It's not as common. Sometimes we receive people from Haiti or from Central America, but that's not so common because, as Elena was saying, they usually go north. So we think we have no impact of climate change in human mobility in our region, and that's not true. So our main challenge is to address displacement based on forms of land management and exploitation of natural resources, as also climate change. And it has an impact that maybe is slower, maybe it's not as easily identified, because even if you ask the person who is migrant, he or she will say, because I didn't have a job, I didn't have the resources to live. But if you go back in those reasons, maybe you will find climate change and climate change produced by humans, by human actions that affect the quality of life in those countries. So they have no other choice than to cross borders to find another answer. So it's difficult for us to feel that we have something to say when we talk about climate change mobility, because we think we have not climate change mobility, but we do. We have that other kind of climate change that we made by ourselves in these unfair production systems and exploitation of land. So that's our main challenge when we think, why do people migrate in our region, to problematize the economic reasons and to go further and try to get to the real reason behind that, and to understand that economic migrants are not always voluntary. It's not a fully free choice of life to migrate when you feel forced by hunger or by having no house or land to stay. So I will leave it there so we can go exchanging experiences in the three regions.
Great, thank you so much, Lucia. And I think you've underscored one of the complexities for organizations that are accompanying people who are impacted by climate change and trying to work on translating experiences into policy and helping people speak directly about their experiences to policymakers is that it is a complex set of drivers. That climate change is one factor that's taking place. It's one form of injustice, but often not the only form of injustice that people are experiencing. So how to find what are the kinds of protections that would be most needed and most in demand. I think I'll start the conversation. I'll just mention to the audience that you can feel free to put questions for our speakers in the chat function. We have, I think, a good amount of time now for discussion and question and answer. Starting by asking, what would you say maybe is one key challenge, but also one key opportunity that you're seeing from within your region to advance responses that are more rooted in justice and more rooted in people's dignity and protecting people's human rights?
I'm happy to start with that, Andrew. And I just realized I got overwhelmed with talking about the impacts that I forgot to address some of the other questions. In the Pacific, it's a bit, I think it's unique because not a lot of the communities at risk want to move anywhere. the connection that people have with regards to their ancestral lands and how that's deeply rooted in their identity has really shaped some of the advocacy coming from the Pacific, in that what justice looks like from the Pacific region is countries who are emitting the most to pay their fair share. So that means, investing more into the adaptation or resiliency infrastructure that the region needs, instead of, sending them or creating these agreements where they are sent and where the realization of their human rights in another land is not guaranteed. So from the Pacific's perspective, yeah, definitely demanding that industrialized countries pay their fair share, putting more funds into the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, and making those funds much more accessible for developing nations in the region. I think from a local perspective, it's making sure that these funds get to the local communities. And as well as pushing for mitigation measures in the different countries that are emitting the most. I think when it comes to the movement of people, because there is recognition that these efforts are not enough, that people will have to move. Strengthening some of the local laws and policies with regards to internal displacement is much more preferable than cross-border migration. And I mentioned this in our prep, the right to migrate, to mobility, does not preclude the right to stay. So I think that should be where the focus is, at least for the region, protecting their right to stay, making sure that there are pathways, safe, legal pathways available for them if they do choose to migrate, but that decision should always come from the local, from the grassroots level. I think there's some bilateral agreements that could be used as models. The Marshall Islands and some other countries have enjoy the benefits of the Compact of Free Association Agreement with the United States, which allows them to come into the United States legally and work and go and get school and send resources back home. I think having that kind of model available with other countries in the region, Australia, New Zealand, some which exist, like the Pacific Labor Scheme is a huge opportunity that allows Pacific Islanders to go to Australia, New Zealand, and do seasonal work that supports them financially. But at the same time, we've been hearing issues about them not getting enough wages and not getting their fair share, or being in very dehumanizing, or being treated in a dehumanizing way. So I think providing those legal pathways, but also making sure that their rights are protected in the countries that they go to. I think those are some of the options from the Pacific. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Helen and Lucia.
Well, I think that ideally there should be both mitigation and adaptation policies that we should be observing to respond to climate change. And we are seeing very little of that. And I think it's, of course, a result of the terrible economic conditions in which many of these countries are. Mitigation and adaptation sometimes appears as a luxury. The state budget is unable to include funds for that, and of course some of these countries have been really severely impacted by corruption, and that is of course a very important factor that may even undermine the enthusiasm from international agencies to engage in some form of projects and collaboration with some of those countries. So I think that there are important challenges. Well, when we discuss whether individuals are willing to move, I really like that question from Salode as she framed it. Do they even want to move? And what we are actually even seeing now with the impact of the hurricanes is that coastal communities who lost everything are not considering moving because it's their land, it's the place they know, and they are not also being offered options by the state, like you could relocate in this place or the other. And I think that this is their only option is to remain where they are, in spite of flooding, in spite of hurricanes, in spite of living in the dry corridor. There simply are not other options. So when we're thinking about mitigation and adaptation strategies, we definitely need significant support for them to be possible. I think that another important element in this discussion is how strong is the legal framework and the state response to internal displacement. When we see very weak systems, that also undermines the possibility of individuals to relocate somewhere else. And when we see that there is a stronger legal framework and stronger institutional support and even acceptance of the concept of internal displacement, then there may be more resources that could help individuals who are first internal displaced persons as a result of climate. And I think that that's an important element. I would underscore that particularly in Central America, that has been a long fought battle for a while. Some states have even refused to acknowledge that there is internal displacement. And I think that's important. But I also want to underscore the second point that Charlotte made, which I think it's crucial that we understand. And it's that a land is not only an economic resource, but it is also their ancestral land. There are cultural and religious reasons attached to that land. And so possibilities of moving do not seem an attractive reason for indigenous communities and also for Afro-descendant communities. And so when we're talking about displacement in these communities, we also have to underscore the importance of the cultural loss entailed in individuals having to flee. And I think that this is also an important factor that we should bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you both. Well, I think you have both put some really important issues on the table, and as usual, we have this different situation here where, as I was saying before, we don't have an impact of the situations that you were discussing, and so what we see is a slower movement, a slower displacement of people. So what I'm going to talk about is when people do migrate, when people do cross borders, because that's the reality we have here in South America mostly. Because as I was saying before, we have a different kind of climate change impact. So here in South America, we have some challenges and some good practices that are important to bring. As I was saying at the beginning, we have some tradition of mobility inside the region, especially around the Mercosur system. We have this fundamental piece to consolidate these practices, that is the agreement of residence of Mercosur, and it helped people move around the region and have pathways to have their situation regularized easily, and it also brought that even in different speeds, several countries in the region started to modify their laws to incorporate this agreement. So we have a framework that is to allow the movements inside the region more easily, and to allow to the residents of the nationals inside the region. That's a good practice, and that helped us to address the mobility in the region. But sometimes we can see that as a challenge, because people tend, or states tend to that system, to the migratory system, and sometimes that puts the asylum system and the international protection system kind of under the shadows. So having good migration policies and regularization pathways is a strong practice. It's a good practice, but sometimes it weakens the asylum systems. And sometimes the states arrange humanitarian responses in the migratory system, and that discourages access to international protection when there are situations of massive displacements that should be approached from the international protection system. Also, as I was saying earlier, one of our main challenges is to understand the economical factors of the climate change and to understand the unfair production systems as climate change or having impact on climate change and in the chain to get to the mobility in the region. That is absolutely in the shadows. We don't see that, we don't talk about that. And that's a big issue for us, that's a main challenge. But we can also highlight some lessons that we have learned in these years, that South America has arranged some responses to these exceptional situations and massive displacements. And we have the experience, well, right now we have the current situation in Venezuela, but we also a few years ago, we had the situation of Haiti that was actually a natural disaster. And states in the region arranged responses from the humanitarian perspective. And that's the main highlight from our frameworks, that laws and systems and migration policies in the region have put in the center of the responsibility of the states the humanitarian approach and the human rights of migrants. And that is something that I think should be, we should tell it more, and we should be telling about this and showing it around, because it is a good practice. It started from one country and then it was spread onto the region, and it helped people move safely and with access to services and rights in the same conditions as nationals mostly. So I think we have some challenges, of course, and our main challenge is to sustain those systems instead of the government politics and from the change of governments. But behind that, that might be a weakness. We do have solid systems that recognize human rights to migrate, and that helps us to address the mobility in the region from a human rights perspective, and to address these massive movements that are not as usual for us in our region, not at least from the point of view of the other regions. But when they happen, we have a system that is prepared to address them. And we have a human rights perspective among all these challenges. So I think we should highlight that from our perspective and from this point of view that we have, as I've said many times, a different situation. We don't have massive movements from climate change, but we have climate change mobility in slow movements.
Thanks. I've heard all three of our speakers allude to issues of perception around these issues, and how that may be related to what kinds of response options are even being considered or being made available, where there's inaction, why there's inaction. I'm curious, what are you observing in terms of how this broad theme, climate change and human mobility, is being framed in the media? Are there important messages that you think are not getting the attention that they should? Are there messages or narratives that you're seeing that might be counterproductive or even possibly harmful for people who are facing the brunt of climate impacts?
Yeah, I think that there's, I'm going to keep my video off if that's okay. I think my internet connection is a bit weak on this end.
Sure, no problem.
Great, thank you. You know, there was a lot of media around this Kiribati man seeking seeking asylum in New Zealand because of climate change. And it was all over the news, and I'll share a link afterwards. But you know, our partner has been in conversation with him. He's back in Kiribati on the island where on a daily basis it's being inundated with you know, during the high tide. So a high tide, you know, happens maybe once or twice a day, and so every time that happens, his home floods. And that was so the primary reason he went to New Zealand and sought asylum from the New Zealand courts, and it was denied. So he was sent back. Him and his family were sent back to this island in Kiribati. And you know, we were trying to get in touch with him to find out, you know, how did the process go? And there was a lot of media that was contacting us to get in touch with him. And we weren't contacting him because of the media. We just wanted to know how he was. And the feedback was that the whole process, the way that the media portrayed him, the way that he and his family's name were being passed around as if he was a subject or an object to be researched or used as a basis of developing human rights you know, policy or migration policy for other communities was a very dehumanizing process. He was ashamed to show his face. Him and his family have also, there's a stigma now about people migrating to New Zealand and Australia and trying to get that and trying to get asylum because of climate change, because of his own experience. So I think that there's a lot to learn from that process. That you know, as William mentioned before this panel, that we really should be looking beyond, you know, the language. We should be looking carefully at the language that we use, that these human beings have feelings, that their dignities are, that they have human dignities, and that these kinds of narratives are very personally felt by individuals. So that's an example that I would want to share, but that also, you know, it reflects also on some of the reports that are coming out about migration, and it's fueling some of the xenophobia, and we see this especially in the cross-border migration in Europe. You know, the Brexit, during that crisis, how xenophobia was just being fueled by some of the articles that were being spewed out by the media. And I think we all have good intentions of wanting to raise awareness about this issue, wanting to raise awareness about the different drivers of migration. And yeah, it's just making sure, and it's hard to do that, I know, of also trying at the same time to try and protect you know, the rights of people, and being careful not to do these things.
I think that the question on messaging is very provocative, Andrew, and it's a very good one, because I find again that we are kind of stuck. I think that the important messaging is on understanding climate change, making sure that it becomes an issue that everyone can relate to and that they can understand. So it's not this complicated scientific phenomenon that you need, you know, some very specific knowledge to actually understand and observe. And I think that that has to be something that we include in our messaging. Including climate change as part of the work that any organization working on migration does is vital. And I am afraid that very much it's kind of on the side. So you talk to many organizations and you say, we're working on this, and they're like, well, we are not doing it. And well, I think that our call should be, all of you should be doing it. And perhaps, and most likely, you are doing it, but you are not aware that many of the individuals that you are referring, that you're receiving and you're working on and you're working for, have been forced to move as a result of climate change. And I think that how Lucia framed it, it's a very useful way. I think that it's how do we unpack all of the reasons why a person migrates. And then on the other hand, I think that the other important challenge that we have is what are the options within a specific legal framework. And within the Americas, we have the Cartagena Declaration with its widening of the definition of who is a refugee. And within that wider definition, we can try to push for protection of individuals who are fleeing as a result of climate change. And that is very effective. The challenge that we have is that if that is how they explain in the United States that has not adopted the Cartagena Declaration, they will be immediately sent back. They will not pass the first step in the process, the credible fear interview. So sadly, even if someone was able to explain this is what happened to me, we know that that would not help that person begin an asylum process in the United States. And on the other hand, there are very limited pathways for regular migration as a result of climate displacement. So I think that the important challenge is how do we insist that climate has to be taken into account and become a pathway for regular migration. And that cannot be, this futuristic version of what our grandchildren will see. It has to be our claim of what should be in our agenda today. And I would like to echo William's words in the last panel when he was saying, we can't say this will happen in 10 years. We have to say this is what we need now. And if I may, I would like to propose that just as he was saying, detention of children is not acceptable for the International Migration Review Forum, we also insist that a path for migration based on climate is also included, and it's one of our expectations and demands in 2 years. Thank you.
Well, just to add something really, really small, here, of course, we have no narratives, no media impact around climate change. We have media treatment around climate change in order to natural disasters. We still have to understand better what climate change means. So of course we are really far away from having narratives around climate change mobility in our region. I think, as what Elena said, everything. I think we need to unpack the reasons behind the economic reasons, and that would be really positive. And we need to, I think we need to put the Cartagena definition more on the spotlight and to grab that and use that. The thing is, in our region, mostly the asylum systems are weak. We have small asylum systems, national asylum systems, I mean. So there is no infrastructure to address this issue properly. But it would be really interesting to have a look in the media of the real reasons why people move, why people are displaced. Unfortunately, here we have media that are not very much alive. We have a narrative around migration that is really linked to criminalization and security issues. So it's really difficult for us to put this topic in the center. And on the other hand, climate change, as I was saying, and as Elena also said, is a thing that we look at that as a scientific or something that happens far away. We have no climate change. Even though we see every year the sea higher and the rivers bigger, and we don't understand that as climate change properly. We think it's something that happens far away, that happens in the Pacific or in Central America, that are these disasters that are humanitarian and we feel really deeply in our hearts, but we think that doesn't affect us. Or it is something that the youth is bringing and we do not relate with that. So we need to build a narrative around it, around the the climate change affecting us every day and in every single action we do, and also in the climate change migration that is here in our region and we do not see it properly.
Thanks. I think we've already had a few very powerful calls to action from this conversation. I want to field one of the questions that's coming in from the chat from our colleague Evelyn Tennant. Evelyn's one of our co-conveners for the CMDP platform. How or whether and how can we take advantage of the fact that the Global Compact for Migration mentions a coherent, coordinated implementation of the 2030 agenda, including SDGs, Paris Agreement, Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. We know the GCM also explicitly names climate as an adverse driver. It feels like the framework is there, yet we're still feeling the challenge of operationalizing what's in the global frameworks and regional frameworks. You both, Helena and Lucia, you both mentioned Cartagena. That the urgency also feels like it's growing. How could these international frameworks be operationalized in national and subnational policies? Are there any good examples you've had from within spaces where you're working or your partners are working?
I would say,
Cartagena.
oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Charlotte, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Helena.
Well, I was just going to say that the Cartagena Declaration is a very interesting example of a soft law document that actually was incorporated into the legislation of many countries in Latin America. And that was indeed a very, progressive development. And it's interesting when you try to observe how it has been enacted. I think that probably the greatest challenge we have is that in a few countries, when they grant refugee status to a person, they specifically describe the reasons why that person was granted refugee status. And so sometimes we see general statistics, and that is the case with Mexico, and we can see that a number of people are receiving protection under Cartagena than actually under the 1951 Refugee Convention, which is indeed very positive. But we can, in some cases, we cannot see clear cut that is happening. And even if they're granted protection under Cartagena, we don't know under what grounds from Cartagena they're being granted protection. So if we could, develop that further and understand that better, that would, I think, be an interesting development. But I think it's important to underscore that perhaps within regions where forced migration has been part of the history of those regions, when countries have undergone difficult situations resulting in the movement of people from their countries, in the exile of people from their country, we also observe, a greater willingness, a political will to be generous countries. And I think that is probably a stronger practice that we see within Latin America, which I think it's very, very provoking. So perhaps you need to have suffered it to know that your nationals were forced to flee as a result of a dictatorship, as a result of an armed conflict, to be willing later in a transitional government in another period to be generous. And I think that is perhaps a sad opportunity, but an opportunity after all.
Well, Andrew, I just saw Melina join, and I maybe she can answer that question. Osiale.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. My apologies for jumping in late. We are currently coordinating civil society coordination center with our Fiji-based umbrella NGOs because of cyclone TC Yasa. Meanwhile, there's been another one that has passed us, DC Susa, a couple of days ago. And I think my comment is just around that, where we have now seen the pattern of hurricanes in the Pacific is not the usual, where we have seen the disruptions in climate patterns is really take note of the impact of climate change in our everyday life in our region. But my comment is that I don't think that we have seen enough of the coherence within migration policies, migration declarations at the global level being operationalized to embrace or being institutionalized into some of the other related issues like climate crisis and the humanitarian, where it speaks to the Paris Agreement and also speak to the Sendai framework of disaster risk management. But having said that, we still see the migration criteria that are used, particularly New Zealand and Australia, for example, because that's our bigger sisters around our region, where they are part of our region, but then at the same time, they're like to distract themselves to think that they're kind of a standalone looking from outside in to the Pacific. And I have, when I joined in, I heard Charlotte talking about the examples of the migrations issue with the person from Kiribati. We also heard similar stories being told from Tuvalu of the migration criteria, where some of the families are being forced to make difficult decisions of migrating or moving to New Zealand. In the whole process, totally ignore or it's just like specifically said, you have your disability child, this disability child will not join the family. And so the disability person was left with the grandparents back in Tuvalu, where the rest of the family make the choice to move. And so, why is it that we still have this kind of experiences, even though we already have various framework, various global instruments that can help us frame the way that we see how migration criteria and selection processes to make sure that there are human rights-based approaches are being applied. So there is still a disconnections. So what we are doing now is a Pacific Islands Association of NGOs, where we work in 24 countries and territories in the Pacific as an umbrella regional-based network, is trying to make sure that when we talk about SDGs, when we talk about the national determined indicators that our countries are used, where the Pacific is very progressive in terms of collective, our leaders, for one thing, we have come together on climate and negotiate at the global level on a collective base. But we still find that that the migration component of things are being negotiated outside of this framework. So our push now for our government at the regional level is to incorporate those principles of having a human right-based approach to migration, particularly on climate change displacement, where we still find that there's a lot of issues that still critical to conversation in countries that are not happening. One is our cultural and our traditional values should be part of any negotiations. The other one that we have seen in the connections of our oceans, in seeing that. The other one is how do we deal with land issues? Yeah, and where we are now seeing that the framing of the conversation about displaced climate change, displaced migration was like now that Australia and particularly Australia is looking at, okay, if we are bringing people into Australia, who is going to have the sovereignty? Where is the sovereignty right of people in Kiribati and people in Tuvalu, and yeah? So it's make things complicated because now there's a much more pressure on some of these small islands in making decision to negotiate, because now it's like you move, someone else is going to manage your sovereignty. Yeah, especially when our oceans has a lot of resources in there, not just fisheries, but our deep sea mining minerals that is going to be resourcing the renewable energy in the rest of the world is here in the Pacific. So there's a whole lot of uncertainty, a scary thing that has kind of hold us back in terms of saying, is this really a genuine offer, or is it just something that we being roped in as a colonialism still in some of our bigger countries in our Pacific? The other one that we have seen now is that in the COVID situation and in this whole climate change connected cyclones and disaster, we have seen Australia pushing, New Zealand pushing for the PESA Plus, the trade negotiations, yeah, and so it's really putting us in a very critical situations where we don't see the genuine offer to support or find solutions, but really much in terms of using some of this situation to look for what can benefit them. One of my last point is that the critical area on training, particularly on vocational training, TVET is what we use as a term. We started to see some of the Australian education institution partnership are being used in our Pacific. And then you find the disconnections into the vocational training. Is it to meet the demand of our own countries, or is it to meet the demand of Australia's market-driven economy? Yeah, where a lot of the training is just so that they know. So they're already like ready. They figure us out already. Like before you come, before you migrate, you might as well now train you to be coming to pick our fruits, or train you to come and work in our building industry, train you into the infrastructure development that we had in our plan for the long term. So those are the things that is like really threatening to see, but we don't see that it's being picked up in any of the negotiation by our Pacific leaders. And I think this is where I see, if we are to see a coherence in SDGs and others with the migration interest in place about how the right of people that are to have the choice to move, then we need to look at it at all the dimensions, the labor market, of our educations, of our vocational training, let alone look into the corporate capture in our natural resources when we are in a situation to negotiate that. Thank you very much, guys. I am sorry, I can be very passionate about this thing, but I see colonialisms and it's hidden in all of this that we need to unpack further. And I suppose this is where I like this conversation happening now. Unfortunately, we are in the midst of trying to see how we can influence government in our responses. But thank you very much for the opportunity. Vinaka.
Siale, thank you so much. It's great to hear your voice, and certainly our thoughts are all with you and with Piango and with the communities that you're serving with the impacts of the storm. And we're hoping for the best in terms of the recovery. And I can invite you maybe to respond first. We have maybe just a few more minutes left for this session, but I'll ask one closing question for our speakers. What kinds of solidarity do people and communities in your regions want, need, demand from civil society? And maybe I'll add the word accountability also to that. So not only solidarity, but accountability. What are they looking from civil society? What are they looking for from global networks?
Thank you.
Siale,
Maybe
if
I
you're-
could
Please.
pick up the conversation before the others, Charlotte and my Pacific colleague are here too. It's very difficult, Andrew, because what we have seen is that it's like that we are in a negotiating of all the global framework, all the things that we are talking about. But then at the end of it, there is like a little catch, like you are out fishing and you have the bait somewhere hidden there. So you're putting the bait out that's related to you migrating to Australia, migrating to New Zealand. You are putting things out where then it's very hard for civil society and the community and the citizens themselves to make the decisions to go further deeper, because like for example in our vocational training, who would want to think deeper about that there is a catch when you know that education is fundamental to stabilize the different layer of ranking in your hierarchy society. And your parents, nothing else you would love to have your children but to be trained, given empowerment in terms of having some hope of employment in the future. Whereas the negotiating catch is often left to some only of a few of our government officials. Yeah, and then civil society, when we have to build the solidarity, calling accountability for our government, it depends on how much we understand what's going on in the negotiation table. And much of this negotiations is based, we are not a part of it. So I think this is where I would think that if we want to build solidarity, it's just to make sure that we are up to bar with information, we are up to bar with understanding of where things are. And it's a complicated and difficult space for civil society to be there. The little effort that we had is with Piango, with the support of Charlotte and her team, Pefi King and the others that has been part of this network, is the small information that we get that can hold. So one of the things that I'm hoping that we could have more spaces of dialogue and discussions like now, so that happens in the Pacific itself, in terms of further articulating what does it mean when you have to remove the layers of whatever the benefit that these other people are saying, that this is going to be good for all the Pacific, this is going to be good. And then we started to see our Pacific leaders, as much as they're collective and they're strong in pushing for climate change, as soon as there are some financial benefit coming in, they started to pull themselves out and go bilateral. Yeah, and then it started to challenge the whole regionalism in standing up together. So it's now left for civil society to build solidarity around advocating, calling for our leaders to be more accountable in terms of representing our voices in some of these negotiations. One of the things that we had done in Kiribati as a project is getting down to the community and get all their stories and what do they want to see being supported in country, so that when they do decide to move or not to move or whatever, it's part of a decision, of an informed decision. So some of those conversations now get to inform the government of Kiribati in terms of their negotiating with New Zealand, Australia, if there is going to be a climate displaced migration, whatever that they want to see being supported. But interesting enough, because we often claim that our or people who are the media, as Charlotte have mentioned, and others who are telling stories of our Pacific, they say that our communities don't understand climate change. Yeah, but these particular projects, when we go in, one of the things that our communities are saying, yeah, we don't understand climate change, we don't understand the science of it, but just listen to their stories, listen to their songs, their poem, their music. their traditional dance. All of that, the theme is on climate change. So they may not understand the science, but living the climate change impact is their life now. And it's being expressed in their dance, in their dramas, in their, so it's amazing how that thing, but if you're looking at solidarity, I think one of that would be probably for us as civil society in the region to reach out more to the global network, people like yourself and others, to continue having this kind of conversation, unpacking, simplify the jargon in the international, language that oftentimes we don't understand. It's my example with climate change in Kiribati. They don't understand the science, but if you listen further to their stories, they understand because they live it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If we have maybe just a few more minutes, any last thoughts, comments, suggestions from our panelists? We've already got a very powerful call to action. So I think we can just follow the transcript of this session, and that should get us to our, if perhaps not even a 2-year plan, but a now plan that we need to be pushing forward. Thanks everyone. Thanks to all of our speakers, Elena, Lucia, Salote, Ciale, and thanks to the organizers for giving the space for this important theme to be part of our conversation. Turn it back to Colin.
Thank you, Andrew. Wow, that was truly inspiring. Ciale and everyone, much respect to you. I know in the midst of relief efforts and from YASA and jumping on to talk to us, we really appreciate it, Ciale. And to all of you, I think these are the conversations that we seldom hear enough about. I mean, I remember the negotiations around climate, we kept talking about, yes, climate is important, but we never got down to all the nuances and the understanding about sovereignty. These are really critical things to really raise, and we really appreciate CMDP taking the lead and kind of putting this together. Thank you so much for that. Believe it or not, this takes us to hour 12 hours, and as much as I'm exhausted, it feels like it's gone really fast because there have been so interesting discussions, very inspiring, very passionate, very very cutting edge. It feels like we're kind of on the edge, kind of pushing things quite a bit. And it also feels like this is just the beginning of a conversation after we take a break. But this is just the beginning of a conversation that we want to take and go further. For those who are just joining us, welcome. For those who have been with us for a while, thank you for staying on. And when we have a closing ceremony, and it's unlike the traditional kind of closing ceremony, because we have some sort of wrapping up messages, but we also have a celebration. We did not want to forget. And I know in the beginning, at the start of this today, and those who were still with us right at the start, that was mentioned about, like, it's not just a celebration. And yes, we've talked so much about the need for justice in so many different issues, but we wanted to also take a moment to celebrate our community, celebrate this day and what it means for us, and celebrate the fact that we're here, we're still fighting, we're still organizing, we're still struggling together. And that's an important fact. And that was reiterated many, many times today. Coming together and doing this together and being willing to, find our synergy and find our coherence and bring our messages together is what is going to take us forward as civil society. So we really appreciate you doing that. So with that, I'm going to turn over to our MC for our closing ceremony, Ignacio. If I can ask Sara to put Ignacio back, and our two speakers for today, Eva Sanders and Stefan Jacquemet.
Hi.
Hi, Eva. Let's see if we get Ignacio.
I have no idea how you do this.
Eva, you're almost there. You're almost.
I don't know why. Maybe it's like, oh my God, sorry.
You got it. You got it, Eva. That's it.
Really?
Now just, yes.
I don't
now,
see myself, but that's
we see
okay.
you. We see
Why
you.
doesn't it work? Usually. Oh, we're
There
getting
you
there.
go. Fantastic. But
Well, maybe it's better you don't see me. That's okay too.
no, that's great. That's great. Ignacio,
I'm sorry, but I don't know what's happening.
do we have Ignacio?
Yes, good,
Perfect.
good, whatever. I see I can't switch my video on. It says that the host.
Yeah, we're both having trouble.
I don't know what that means.
Just to clearing.
Eh?
I'm just making you co-host.
Yeah, I think Sada's just going to make you a co-host, which will get your video
I
up.
don't understand why.
No, Eva, we can see you. Eva,
You
we
can see one eye.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't
That's
know.
fine.
It's the first time this has happened.
But certainly waiting for me to go on video. I think I can perhaps start the ceremony which Colin has announced. We're 39 at the beginning of the ceremony. Let's see if we remain at least 39 at the end. This is really a very special moment, and really the way it has been set up, I think you're going to be spending a really great hour. The 13th hour, as Colin said, of this event, very original event. And as you see, as a special, not many people have ever seen me in a tie. Well, you do see me today because I really wanted to make it special. We are celebrating. And it's really my great honor to be just 12 inches away from you. That's what it means, togetherness. When even when we are in very different time zones, and also having to connect in the last 9-10 months only online. But such a pleasure, and such a pleasure to have Eva and Stefan for this closing ceremony. It's I think you come from all over the places, and I would like us to be active and use the chat and say where are we calling from. Some of you are at 11 o'clock at night. Others are already Saturday morning. We had Siale just now, and I would invite you in the chat just to say where are you coming from, and perhaps what time are you time zone are you on. And during these last 13 hours, we've had over 60 speakers, and we're really happy to have Eva and Stefan to close this series of 60 speakers. But we've had hundreds and hundreds of comments in the chat box, and as Colin has said, some extremely interesting discussions throughout this very innovative way of keeping a conversation going on for a full day. And today is a day of celebration. We celebrate today the vast contribution of migrants and locals who continue to risk their lives working on the front line of COVID-19 crisis, supporting communities as humanitarians, as skilled health or care workers, as cleaners, as food delivery, as providers, and other keeping vital sections of the economy going through the COVID-19 pandemic. And the role of migrants is so essential. Amber Dewson, the Secretary General of BWI this morning or a few hours ago said, when you get your vaccine injection, you can know that there are migrants behind that, because the people who have worked in the labs, who have developed and probably also providing the services are mostly from migrant communities. So today we celebrate also the 30th anniversary of the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrants, Workers and Their Families. Important to keep on repeating it, as some seem to have to forget it or to slip it out of their communication. So important. That is also what we're celebrating today. And we're celebrating the 2-year anniversary of the adoption of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. But of course, all is not celebration. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the respect for rights and conditions in a world already marked by acute inequalities. Marginalized groups have been hard hit by this multidimensional crisis, and including and with particular attention to migrant workers, their families, and communities. And today, throughout the day, in different statements that have come out from our organizations, but also in the exchanges we've had, we have been calling on governments to protect and respect the human rights. But today we have also shown solidarity and the concept of having 13 hours of in-depth thinking exchanges and bringing different views from different horizons, different communities, bringing this togetherness has been really key. We certainly owe a debt of thanks to all those women and men, migrants and locals, who are essential workers at the moment. And I think we can, with this, certainly want to move on to give the opportunity for Eva Sandis and Stéphane Jacquemet to share some thoughts. And afterwards, we're going to go more on this celebration with about half an hour with 4 different musicians, artists who will be sharing some of their great art and their great skills. But it's really such a pleasure for me to invite Eva Sandis. She is such an extraordinary friend for me and for many of us. I mean, when I started in the area of migration, at least on policy of migration, I mean, she's helped me so much. I really consider you, Eva, as a mentor, and I have always enjoyed how you would push us a bit more and say, no, that's not right, or that's not the direction, really. And you have such a career behind you, having and being a professor emerita at the Fordham College at the Lincoln Center, and you were chair, and you're still representative and extremely active in the NGO Committee of Migration. Eva, can we ask you to share a few thoughts at the end of this this marathon? Well, 13 hours, you can do more than one marathon, you know, in 13 hours. Eva.
Thank you. You went a little bit overboard, but that's okay too. Thank you very much. Thank you, friends and colleagues. I'm glad to have spent the day with you and to have the opportunity to say a few words as we come to the close of a great program commemorating International Migrants Day, the 30th anniversary of the Migrant Workers Convention, and the 2nd anniversary of the adoption of the Global Compact on Migration. The Global Compact is our joint accomplishment. Like all of you, and with many of you, our NGO Committee on Migration has worked untiringly for the adoption of the Compact 2 years ago and for its implementation since then. And despite compromises and gaps that need urgent attention, there is widespread agreement among us that it's a very practical instrument. So now, let's make it work, and let's build on what's out there. Where do we go next? What are our implementation goals and priorities, and how do we propose to get there? The following suggestions, comments, and questions are based on your voices during the weekly webinars on each of the GCM objectives and elsewhere, including in today's celebration, as much as I could follow. For starters, there were calls for some very broad implementation goals, such as Bridging the SDGs and the Global Compact, since development by and for migrants is essential. Just reminder that the 2030 agenda has the very significant determination to leave no one behind. Nevertheless, on migration specifically, it has no goal and just one target, 10.7, which, however, has been expanded to 23 Global Compact on Migration objectives. A second broad call for bridging the Global Compact on Migration and the one on refugees to keep migrants fleeing climate crises, as you've just discussed, and those in mixed migration flows from falling through the cracks. By the way, that will be the focus of the next monthly meeting of the NGO Committee on Migration. And although he doesn't know it, we're hoping that Ignacio will be part of that discussion. I thought I'd use this opportunity. Also broadly looking at systemic issues and how to address them so that actions are not ad hoc, but planned ahead. Then there were a series of more specific calls for and questions about implementation priorities. On data, overriding question, what kind of data do we need? On drivers, strong push for a Marshall Plan for developing countries and for debt forgiveness. On information, urgent questions for providers. Is the information updated, timely, empowering? Is it listened to? Is it passed on? On pathways, agreement that regular safe pathways are essential to avoid irregular, unplanned, unsafe migration. Keystone? Yes, but reminder, keystones need all the other stones to maintain the archway. Recruitment? Yes, this industry needs to be reformed. Furthermore, wage theft needs to be addressed. Overall, it's imperative that migrant workers have agency, voice, and organization. On migrants in vulnerable situations, let's remember, migrants' vulnerabilities are mainly constructed. Protection should be built in, not a reaction. And no one is safe till everybody's safe. And in this connection, allow me to take one moment to let you know about an ongoing project of our NGO committee to propel our advocacy efforts on behalf of migrants in vulnerable situations, a core priority. The project, which began in August, is intended to raise consciousness about protection gaps by seeing them through the experiences of migrants. We've collected some 40 stories by migrants from 4 world regions, the Americas, Near East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. We are analyzing the stories to see how the experiences of migrants in vulnerable situations in countries of origin, transit, and destination align with the commitments of the Global Compact on Migration. This allows us to identify gaps in policies and practices that need to be addressed and to circulate good practices by member states that implement the Compact's commitments. On smuggling, smuggling should be looked at from a protection perspective, since migrants resort to it due to choicelessness. Instead of criminalization, there should be support of humanitarian facilitation. And to quote one of you, we've gone so far in securitization of borders, so far in the wrong direction, people are afraid to do humanitarian work. We need a U-turn immediately. On borders, plea to work towards a world in which borders become bridges and to reimagine how we get there. On migration procedures, insistence that there's a need for procedures in mixed migration that are more human rights based. On detention, unanimous agreement that it is a clear violation of human rights and never in the best interests of children, and that we need a strategy for dealing with this issue at the 2022 Review Forum. Consular protection, strong affirmation, including by the consuls themselves, that the consular mandates need to be broadened and the consular staff need to be resourced. On inclusion and access to services, that the institutionalized othering of migrants has to stop, and access to services, especially health, is available to all who need it. And now, from the what to the how of GCM implementation. Again, based on your voices, how do we proceed? Let's use this pandemic-induced migration pause to reset, not to catch up, to go forward, to find new ways of doing things. As Bishop Tutu put it, we need to stop pulling people out of the water, and we need to go upstream to find out why they are falling in. Or as one of you put it, let's measure how we're doing in terms of implementation, using the 1 to 10 approach that doctors use to find out how their patients are doing. Let's collect best practices and make them widely available to member states, agencies, and NGOs. Let's continue to exchange concern with member states through live or virtual mission visits. Let's partner with champion states for GFMD implementation, and let's build on lessons learned. To conclude, and plagiarizing friend moderator William one last time, change is upon us. Many lessons learned are staring us in the face. Let awareness of these shape our work. This is our moment. Let's make it a transformation towards justice and peace. That's the message.
Thank you very much, Eva. I think we can absolutely, we can give you a big applause for this. Thank you very much. It's inspiring, it's ambitious, it's at the same time pragmatic and bridging many of the different elements. Thank you very much, Eva, very much. I'd like to turn to Stéphane, another really good friend. Stéphane Jacquemet is a director of policy at ICMC. And before that, you were 25 years, or more or less 25 years, I think, with UNHCR. So in terms of bridging, you're in really an extraordinary spot also when we come back and talking about the bridging of the global compacts, the bridging on a number of other things. Please, Stéphane, invite you to share a few thoughts on this closing session.
Thank you so much, Ignacio, and I feel so honored to be in this final panel with both you and Eva, and I consider both of you as role models for civil society. I think you mentioned the marathon, and I fully realize that 13 hours for you would probably do more than one marathon, but probably 3 or 4, Ignacio. So now I think Amish Kalki started the day by saying that it would be a global mega event. And for such a global mega event to be successful, and I think it was really, really successful, and I will explain why. A global mega event would need a global mega work, global mega investment, global mega organizational skills from the part of the many people who contribute to the organization of this event. So I think we should all be really grateful to the organizers. There is a volume of work which is just incredible, and just to have substance during 13 hours is really truly exceptional. So that was my first comment. My second one is about the design of the agenda. I mean, the themes which were selected were basically all the big issues which were unresolved before the pandemic and became, multiplied by 20 or 30 by the pandemic. And I think the choice of speakers was also exceptional. I think all of them were extremely candid, and most of them were provocative. I don't think it was the usual, webinar where people come with kind of agreed upon views and there is no real debate or discussion. I think we had a level of engagement which was really, again, truly exceptional. My third comment is that I know that we were all virtual, but even in a virtual event, we can really get the feeling that there were very positive vibes during the whole day, a very good atmosphere, also a very original approach to in this exercise. For example, for me, it was extremely powerful that the theme on wage theft was through the testimonies of migrants rather than the analysis of NGO representatives. In my view, that made the whole session extremely powerful. We also had facts, for example, the whole session around narratives, analysis with the session on the Global Compact and, for example, the session on civil society, and tools with, the migrant workers' rights navigator tools, as well as, for example, the session on pathways. My fourth comments, and I only have 5 because I'm conscious that we are at the end of a very long day, is that, I think it's Jonathan who said, yes, we need to celebrate. It's important to do it, to recognize the contribution of migrants, but we also need to commemorate. It has been an extremely painful years with all the destruction in terms of lives, in terms of jobs, in terms of livelihoods. And I think we reach a good balance between really celebrating and commemorating with a certain gravitas, but also with, enthusiasm in terms of, addressing the future challenges. My last point, and to some extent is probably the most substantive one, I probably need 2 or 3 minutes to explain it, is that I believe, and I think it was quite clear from all the discussions we had today, that civil society is at a crossroad. And we have basically two possibilities whenever we are at a crossroad. And in our case, the first one would be, as I think William mentioned it many times, we can be transactional. We can be basically considering that given the level of destruction this year. We need to rebuild, and when we rebuild, we need to be, compromising. We need to water down our exigencies. We need to be a little bit complacent just because we are afraid of what the road ahead contains for us. And the other approach, and clearly it's the preference of this group of people, and I indeed belong to this group, and this is also my views, is to be principled. Even if there are huge challenges, there is no reason not to be principled. This call for justice, this called for a rights-based approach, even if that will not necessarily please all the governments we are talking to. Because how can we mobilize civil society? And mobilization is another strength of civil society if we propose them a watered down agenda, if we don't fight for justice. And of course, the real challenge when we are calling for justice, when we want to mobilize, at the same time, we need to work together and we need to work with government. And sometimes it's easier to work with governments when we are ready from the start to compromise. But I'm strongly convinced that we can work together with government precisely because we are demanding and because we do call for justice. Working together is indeed to call for justice. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I think we're very, very privileged to be with both of you, Eva and Stefan, with your closing messages. Extremely strong. So really appreciation, Stefan, too, for bringing in your points, and how much I agree that our capacity to work together is most probably the strategic capability that we have and that we have to keep on developing, confronted to the life-threatening and issues that we have ahead of us, or that we're confronted to. With this, I would like to turn to Colin and to William. Colin, I don't know at what time you got up this morning to start off. It was 5 in the morning. On the other side, you had William. You're in Manila at the moment. So William, you must have probably, what time is it? It's 6 o'clock in the morning for you now, no?
Poor guy.
So you're completely on almost the opposites in terms of the time zones, and you have led, and I would also thank other people that have been in the working with you to set up this session. I find it absolutely extraordinary what you have led and set up here. And I would like to invite you both also for a few special words that you would like to address.
Go ahead, William.
Eva herself, that honestly, I think this is our moment. When I'm saying this is our moment, it means really that while I think so many people in the world are waiting to get back to what they thought was normal, and they're just raring to go. It will take a few people to hold back, reflecting on what happened in this year, and see what are the building blocks for a new future. I think that's so important. When we look at what we are saying, and like Stefan says, a rights-based approach, it was after the World War that the rights-based infrastructure was put in place. The Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, Civil, Political Rights, which then went on to give the core human rights standards. And then in 1990, to get the Migrant Workers Convention. That is what we chewed on. That is what we broke our teeth on. And that is what we understood as, in some ways, the delivery of justice, the vehicle for the delivery of justice. So thank you both to Stefan and to Eva. And to Eva, I just want to say how much of an inspiration you are to me. I remember during the negotiations, somebody from within our ranks came to me and said, "Oh, even the NGO committee, they are talking to the missions, you know." And I said, "My God, I couldn't imagine how you," and I saw you one time walking from wherever you live to the UN. And I said, "My God, look at the effort she's putting into this." And I said, if I don't match up to that, it's a shame, you know. So thank you so much for being that inspiration to so many of us. It's fantastic what you do. And I just love it. Stefan, thanks a lot again for all the support, and for all the people on this, and for all the people who have been with us throughout this day. It's been fantastic. It's been fun. It's been another moment of kindling of fire, and putting a fire, like John says, of really a moment of transformation. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I totally agree with William. It's you know, we probably put this together, what, about a month ago. It's crazy to try to do something like this within a month, but it took a lot of effort. But I think the energy and the passion that everybody put into, you know, when I keep hearing the speakers and people talking so passionately about the different issues in a very deep and thoughtful way, I'm always reminded that it takes inspiration. And I know I'm always inspired by Eva Sanders. And Eva, I just want to say this, that, you know, a few weeks ago in one of our GCM webinars, when we were talking about, I think it was around smuggling, and you related your personal story in the webinar. And it's one of the few times, probably the only time I've ever heard you talk about it publicly. And it was such a powerful way of, you know, putting and contextualizing the issue and making it so real and so personal that everything just kind of focused on that. And so Eva, you know, your life, your person as you are, and everything that you've just said, I mean, just that amazing presentation you just gave right now, and powerful words, continues to be such an inspiration to so many of us. So we wanted to take this moment, and if I call on my colleague Clara to kind of flash on screen for a second, we wanted to take a moment to appreciate you, to appreciate your, well, we call it a lifetime of achievement, but it's really a lifetime of contribution. If we have something special we want to give to you in recognition of that, we fortunately, because of the conditions, we won't be able to hand it to you personally, but it's something we will be sending to you, but we wanted to show it to you. If Clara, you're ready to flash it on screen.
No,
Go ahead.
sorry, I can't share my screen right now, but hopefully Martina can. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Martina.
In the meantime, I'll just echo everything that has been said. Eva, really to thank you and to say once again how inspired.
Oh my goodness. You're gonna make me cry right here on the thing. Wow.
So Eva, in recognition from civil society, a Lifetime Achievement Award for Eva Sanders on today, 18th December 2020, in recognition of a lifetime of service in global society for migration. Thank you so much, Eva. We owe you.
I don't deserve it. I love you all, and I'm mortified.
Well, you're just getting started, Eva.
We'll have this in the mail to you very soon, Eva.
Thank you so much. I don't deserve it.
And we look forward to celebrating with you in person in a few months, sometime, somewhere soon.
Thank you so very, very much. But you've undone me. You really have. I don't deserve this. I couldn't have done it without you. You're the inspiration, for heaven's sake. Thank you.
Back to you, Ignacio.
Wonderful, wonderful. And actually, for the others, you can also put in the chat box just to get Eva melt even more. I think that was the objective, no? So please do use the chat box also to congratulate Eva. And we really like to transit now into the performances that we have. We have 4 artists and music. Why music? Because music is highly mobile, and it's part of the culture also that migrants take from one place to another. And we really have the pleasure of having Arnold Garcia with us. Are you there, Arnold? If you can, because
I am here. I'm right
you
next.
are there.
Arnoldo's the name, though, Ignacio.
Sorry?
Arnoldo.
Yes, Arnoldo. Yes.
Yeah.
Editor, trainer, writer, many other things. But I think you work at the moment in restorative justice, and many of your. I understand that many of your work is around issues of migration, and you're offering us a moment of bringing you into your world, and you're in Auckland, so not far from where Colin is, I think, and really invite you to take over now for us.
Thank you. I am on Ohlone land. That's where Oakland, California is. I wrote in the chat, I'm an uninvited guest of the Ohlone. They're very generous, not like the US government. They have welcomed me here for a while. We've in contact with some of the organizations from the Ohlone people who are struggling to degentrify or decolonize the spaces here. And my own roots, of course, my belief is that if you're human, you're a migrant. And there's no way no human can say they're human if they can't recognize migrants or that they have migrants in their legacy. So if you're human, you're a nomad. Humanity was created by migration, was created by migrants, and it's. I have a very big debt to migrants everywhere, starting with my brothers and sisters, my grandparents, my parents. They were migrants, and some of them are still migrants, and some of us are just temporarily, like here on a lonely land like me. So I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote for Jacqueline Cal Makin. And Jacqueline Cal Makin was, I believe she was either 8 or 9 or 10 years old. She's Mayan, and she died of course, in ICE or immigration police custody or detention. And this is called International Migrants Day Revolution. And it was written for this day more than 20 years ago. More than, this is more than 2 years ago, I think, that when Jacqueline's news of her death came. And it's really written, and it's dedicated also to our brothers and sisters, our families who are perishing in the deserts, the oceans and the fields and factories, and also in prisons. The revolution is a migrant. The migrant is a revolution. The migrant revolution cannot be stopped by walls, hate, or police. The revolution is a migrant. The revolution is a migrant girl. The revolution is a migrant family. The revolution is a migrant girl jailed by the US immigration police. The revolution is a migrant girl and her parents jailed by the US immigration police. The revolution is a migrant imprisoned. The revolution is a migrant girl who defied the millionaires' walls, armies, and wars. The revolution is a migrant girl who survived a 3,000-mile journey, crossed through the desert, and was arrested along with her family by the immigration police. The revolution is a migrant girl who died in a US immigration police jail. The revolution is a migrant girl who was dehydrated, had not eaten food or drank water in days, was held in her father's and mother's arms, whose pleas for help, for a doctor, for an aspirin, for life, were ignored by the Border Patrol, by ICE, by the jail guards, by the prison doctors and chaplains, by those of us who think that this is the first time this has happened, who believe that Trump is going to build a wall when the wall and the prisons and the immigration police have already been built. The revolution is a migrant girl at the border, ignored by everyone, not a prisoner. The revolution is a migrant girl who died in an immigration jail, held only, helped only, cared only by love. Her mothers, fathers, her brothers, her sisters, her grandmother, her grandfather, her aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors who all have the same first name. The revolution is a migrant girl who will dismantle the walls and the police. The revolution is a migrant girl. So I come from a people without borders. In my roots, I am African, I am Asian, I am Arab, I am Palestinian, I am Purepecha. I am from the four directions bound for natural liberation. I am Mexican, I am even Chicano, Black with Huasteca roots, a nomad, a human with world roots. I have crossed seas and oblivions. I have sunk plows in the belly of the earth, planting seeds and hopes, cultivating hearts and praises that sing, no human is an immigrant. No human is a minority. No human is undocumented. No human is illegal. We are all either citizens or we are all undocumented. We are all together or we are all rebels. My skin is the color of the earth. My language is the rivers and the seas, speaking crystal clear words, singing rains and hurricanes. I am fragile as autumn. I am the spring that nothing and nobody can stop. I am a day laborer of the horizons, a seamstress of human tenderness, an agricultural labor of love, taking care of roots and deep hugs. I answer all the calls of freedom, and I just like to provoke laughter to defy the barbed wires of hate, because really all borders are wireless. All borders are man-made. The earth has no borders. What's happened is the earth is suffering from human diseases, suffering from the disease of private property, suffering from the disease of the color of our skin, suffering from the male gender disease. Yet we are a people that upsets borders. We are a people that was born in fields and now cleans skyscrapers. We are a people who know how to till land and cure diseases. I, like you, come from a people without borders. So this next one is, like all these other poems, are when I was a migrant farm worker and my family got displaced from Mexico, and I lived in different parts of the US, working in the fields mainly, we always had a dream of returning. And when I started doing this work, right, the more you talk to people who have been displaced, people whose lands or territories have been are being occupied or taken over, we all share that same dream. We always want to return, and things change, right, with time is due. So this is called the religion is to return to the source, to the eternal dream of return. Tomorrow soon I will wake up in your arms, homeland. Tomorrow soon I will wake up in your arms. I will go towards you. You become a shadow of water. And here I am searching for a well, a cenote, a fountain, dust, words, hugs, conversation, unconditional tenderness to renew, to restore, to be reborn with tiny imperceptible wings, scars like borders, to show that I've loved you, to show that I have lived, struggle to the fullest extent to make us free, homeland. Time is different now, so I have to be different. Yet I go to sleep with you, to be with you, even if there is this pain. I live to love you, even if I need more courage to be brave, to be complete, to be at your side, spinning through space, tumbling without no other purpose than to gestate, flower, seed, sprout, unfurl the tender roots of an explosion in your earth, in my land, in my love, in my darkness. I have this eternal dream that will never die, that I will return to your arms. So usually when we have a live gathering, right, it's good to, I would ask everyone to take a 30 seconds, and in the chat box, if you, I'm just inviting you, it's not a requirement, is to just write a couple of words or a sentence of what's coming up for you right now, because you all have been doing some intense work in this gathering, and here I am, reading some poems to you, and we need that interaction, even if it's through this screen. So I'm going to look at your chat box just to make sure that you're all doing okay, and that letting you know that I am try to be very sensitive, right, to this distance that is our work, right? The work of human rights for migrants and refugees, the work of migrant rights. Like I said, it is a revolution. In my family, right, we have Purepecha, Palestinian, Mexican, and US roots. And I sometimes despair thinking that for Palestinians and indigenous people everywhere and migrants everywhere, we're going to need a world revolution to make things right for us. And when we make things right for us, we make things right for all humans, for all of humanity. And it's a big calling, and it's a big, it's going to take many generations to get what we want and what we need in order to make our lives really what they deserve. So I'm going to close with this poem. It's called My Land. And it's really an invitation that I learned from my grandparents, and I turned it into a poem. It's called My Land. My country is the smallest country in the world. My country fits inside 1/100th of one molecule in a touch between one strand of DNA. My country has room for everyone. Every European, every Chinese, every Mexican, every African, every Indian, every Asian Pacific Islander, every queer, every nomad of the earth, every two-legged, four-legged, crawling, burrowing, winged beings, you all, they all, we all fit in my country. Everyone is welcome here. Everyone. I'll happily give you my country as long as you promise not just to take care of her, but to let everyone live in her in peace, in garbled flags, in borders without pigment, borders with human pores, to breathe freely, to live breathing. My country is everyone, is everywhere. My country is small. My country bothers no one, invades no one, drones no one, doesn't stamp your passport, doesn't ask for identity documents. My country lets you be. My country lets you exist as yourself, lets you determine who you are. My country has no borders other than those of humanity to humanity. My country has no armies, no prisons, no police, no homeless. No one suffers at the hands of other humans. My country is all the colors, the clash of colors, the contrast, the muddy blends, the stark yellows, the pink sunrises, the red of your tongue. My country fits in your veins, fits in the bat of an eye. My country welcomes you to our bodily paradise. You can have my country if you want. It's already yours. Walk slowly, take your time. My country is in no rush. Peace and freedom, justice, they take their time. Rest a bit, get up, work hard, party even harder. In my country, even the dead get a turn to dance every now and then. There are no regrets here. There is only life and its mortal pleasures. In my country, oh, in my country, you, all of you here in this meeting, you would fit right in like you always lived here, like your ancestors had been buried there. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to bury your ancestors here in my country, to bring your ancestors over here to my country, to bury them here. Take care of them here. Take care of our country where everyone, where every living being fits. My country is so small that everyone fits. And in one of her pores fit all the suns and moons. My country, you and me. That's it. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my words with you all. And I thank you for all the work you're doing. And I really appreciate every one of you. I know Colin really well, so I know the kind of hard work of his peers that are on this gathering do. So really a lot of appreciation and recognition of your work. Thank you.
Arnoldo, thank you very much for these poems. We do need your voice, and I hope I know it's very difficult to perform online and everybody with a black square, but I hope you felt that positive energy that Stefan was talking about. I see by the reactions that there are. I think many people have been touched by what you've shared. Certainly, I have, and we really need your voice. And yes, make things right, as you say in one of your poems. Thank you, Arnoldo.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate you all.
Yeah. I hope you stay on, Arnoldo. We have and everybody else. We're now going to have a band, a 2-member band. One is a tenor voice from India, and there's a bass guitar from Bangladesh. This is Indus band, and we have a recording of a song. Here it comes.
Let me hum a little bit of flamenco tune. This has been taken from Carlos Saura's movie Flamenco. And let me hum a little bit of Tagore's lines. And we can see the kind of resonance they share.
Right. Yesa, who sent me some information to help me introduce for the different performances, sent me saying that Somali is the wonderful voice that we heard, performed a form of migrating music, a genre merging the stories of human migration, legacy of culture in music, and the saga of ancient civilizations. We'd like now to hear Glenn Jackson. So Glenn Jackson comes from the Rock of Polynesia. The Rock of Polynesia is Niue Island. That's between Tonga, Samoa, and the Cook Islands. And we're going to have also a pre-recorded vocal performance by Glenn Jackson.
Mata fulu ola Hakulo se matala Katata maya koi Velangia hakuloto Katata maya koi Velangia hakuloto Kia koi ni Hoke eva Fehola juke matamaka Kokoini hakuma hofi Kokoini hakufakavihi Kokoini hakuma hofi Loto fakavihi mahakuti anae Mahakuti anae Mahakutia nae asitalia maya Hakuole kenonofo Toko uha Hakufakalofa kiakoe Totukulangi Mahakutia nae asitalia maya Hakuole kenonofo Toko uha Hakufakalofa kiakoe Totukulangi Mahakutia nae你真漂亮美丽如花当你靠近我我的心很温暖当你靠近我我的心很温暖是有你 跟我来我们逃走吧是有你我的宝贝是有你我亲爱的是有你我的宝贝是有你你我美丽的心你我美丽的心你我美丽的心现在回答我为了我们在一起我对你的爱永远我亲爱的现在回答我为了我们在一起我对你的爱 Woji naida Asitalia maya yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. That was Kuku Ni, and not that I did understand, but part of it was in Mandarin. That's again Ayesa who told me, because at the beginning of the COVID-19, Glenn, as a dedication to the Asian communities who were being racially targeted, translated it into Mandarin. And for what I understand today, Glenn released his latest single, Lele Haku Lupe, and this will be available for Christmas on Spotify. So Lele Haku Lupe, so not to lupe that one, so not to miss that one. And we will continue our ceremony. We're getting to the closing progressively of this 13 hours and 9 minutes now, with another vocal performance, also pre-recorded, of Krishnan Hariharan from the Indian Institute for Performing Arts. Krishnan started learning music at a very early age with his mother, and then continued to learn from a number of gurus, and he's given a number of concerts in India, in the Middle East. I'm really looking forward to hear on the pre-recording.
Hello friends, I am Krishnan Hariharan, an Indian citizen living in Bahrain. I would like to thank the Migrant Forum in Asia and Indian Institute of Performing Arts for giving me this unique and wonderful opportunity to musically represent India from the Kingdom of Bahrain. I would also like to convey my best wishes to all those people who are participating today and are coming together to celebrate International Migrants Day. Now, when we think or say India, one of the first images that comes to our mind is that of Mahatma Gandhi. Then, when we think of music and Mahatma Gandhi together, the first song that comes to our mind is Vaishnava Janato. This song was written by 15th century great poet saint from Gujarat, Sri Narsingh Mehta. This song defines the entire humanity as a universal brotherhood, and that is exactly what India has always stood since time immemorial. Yes, the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now, this song.
सकल लोक मासुने वंदे निंदन करे केणी रे वाचकाच मन निश्चल राखे वाचकाच मन निश्चल राखे धन धन जननी तेनी रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए रे समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी परस्त्री जने माता रे समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी परस्त्री जने माता रे जीवहत की असत्य न बोले जीवहत की असत्य न बोले पर धन नव रे वैष्णव जन को तेने कहिए रे वणलोभी ने कपट रहित छे काम क्रोध निवार्य रे भणे नर भणे नर भणे नर तेनु दर्शन करता भणे नर तेनु दर्शन करता कुल एकोतर कार्य रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए रे पीड़ पराई आने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए रे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान नाणे रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए रे पीड़ पराई जाने रे
Yeah, wonderful. That was Krishnan Hariharan. Yeah, super. Yeah. I also recently found out that you have the reactions on the bottom right side of your screen and to give the reactions. Right. What a way of finishing this this event with poems and music, which send powerful messages of solidarity to migrants around the world. We celebrated, we have commemorated migrants, the extraordinary contribution of displaced people and migrants in particular to our world. for this event, I really thank you for all of you who've stayed on to the last hour of the 13 hours. But really a special thanks to those who have made this possible, this innovative, but also very insightful and extremely rich and way of bringing us together, of keeping on thinking on the different topics that unite us. I want to thank in particular William and Ayesa of MFA, of the Action Committee and ICMC, Colin, Clara, and Martina. Of CCRM, I think Rula also gave a contribution. And for GRFD, Sadananda, Rakesh, and Feroz. And I really hope I haven't forgotten anybody. I think you all have put in so much effort and set this up so rapidly and with really high quality. And I think we all want to really thank you for all the work and the success. I think we can call this really a success of what you have put together. We go back to our communities, to our work, and I think we're inspired by what we have learned, by what we have shared, but by our collective thinking, by the stimulations that we have had along the different discussions today, and also to come back with that, and we really need it, that positive energy that Stefan referred to, that provides us that capacity, even if we are on different time zones in Niue Island or in Mexico, but to have that togetherness to keep on for the change that we desperately need on these crossroads that also Stefan referred to us. So wishing you and hoping to be able to be in contact with you, perhaps in this format. I'm sure Colin and William are prepared to set this up again for next month, aren't you, Colin and William? After a good night's sleep, you set off directly, and and wishing you all the best for the weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks all. Thanks all. John, great to see you.
Nice job as usual. Good leadership, guys and gals.